Hello and welcome to the Friday edition of The Hash, where we talk about the latest in crypto news and culture. I'm Zach Seward. We got Naomi Brockwell. We got Ben Powers, Jensen Assey, Will Foxley. The gang is all here today, and we're going to talk about some news. Leading us off today is Will. Hit it.
Yeah, big news out of China this morning. Sichuan, which is the largest area for hydropowered Bitcoin mining in the world, is now under pressure from the government there to put down any Bitcoin mining operations associated with regulations that passed out last year in 2020. They're also putting regulations on private miners as well, which kind of operate in more seedy and like unseemly ways where you can't really track them. This is big news because China has already kind of put out a notice against a lot of other miners in different areas, including Xinjiang and the Yunnan provinces, among a few other places. And so they're just cracking down on Bitcoin mining. They don't want it to happen there anymore. There's been a few reasons given over the last few months for why this is happening. Some of it has to do with carbon neutrality. The Chinese Communist Party has been pushing for that for a little bit. There's also been some speculation over the Chinese Communist Party wanting more social peace and less social unrest, which is they kind of associate with the rise in cryptocurrencies over there generally. And so cracking down on Bitcoin mining is one way where you can kind of touch an aspect of Bitcoin and kind of get that social pressure back down. So pretty big development overall. Sichuan is a huge area for Bitcoin mining, and it's going to probably increase just the movement of Bitcoin mining from China to different areas in the world like Kazakhstan or even North America. I want to toss this right over to Naomi. You've been in the space for a while, and we've seen like lots of different discussions of China banning Bitcoin, China banning Bitcoin mining, China banning Bitcoin exchanges. So what do you think about this new development? It seems pretty serious.
It does seem serious indeed. I mean, it's interesting because we're always scrambling after regulation and clarity so that we can have stability in the space. This kind of goes to show you that you can have, the government giving the blessing to an entire industry and then suddenly just doing a 180. So it seems like the initial miners that are being targeted were ones that were actually sanctioned by the government. They got permission to, get power from these hydro dams. And it's mainly because in Sichuan in particular, they're producing twice as much energy as they can fit in the grid. So you have the wet season and there's way too much electricity there. So they've sanctioned these mining companies to use that excess power there. And now they've turned around and they're the ones that they're going after initially, which is kind of frightening. And I feel for the people there. It's also interesting because you mentioned, Will, they're talking about carbon neutrality. It's like, well, so what does the hydro dam have to do with that? They're producing whatever gases regardless, and this isn't doing anything to increase carbon in the atmosphere. So it's just very interesting that they're trying that tactic as well. It's environmental, when clearly this is all about control. I mean, in parallel to this, you have the government that's rolling out their digital yuan. Apparently they're testing with a bunch of ATMs at the moment across the country. And so it's very clearly a power move where they really don't want decentralized currencies. They really don't want anything outside of their control, and they're realizing that digital money is the future, but they want it to be their digital money. They don't want alternatives there, and so this is just a massive crackdown. It's sad to see it, actually. Zach, I'm going to throw to you.
Yeah, the capital flight stuff in China is real, right? Like people looking to get their assets out of the national currency and into other assets, whether it's Bitcoin, gold, Macau, real estate, whatever. That's a big issue for China, so it makes sense that would certainly be part of the context here. I think this actually this is actually a really big deal, right? This is not the first province to do this. This really does kind of poke some holes in the narrative around a lot of the Bitcoin mined in China, especially during the rainy season, is mined using environmentally responsible power sources driven largely by hydropower, right? There are other externalities with hydropower. Certainly, a lot of these dams displace a lot of people and displace some ecological habitat, but generally speaking, this is the clean power that Bitcoiners like to point to when they say, hey, 60%, hey, 40% of Bitcoin is mined using green energy. So I think this really does compromise the standing of that argument, and I'd be really interested to see what comes of it. I think, Will, you're certainly right, and you have a front row seat here in seeing how mining seeing how mining firms are moving to different geographies. And I just wanted to throw it back to you, Will, since you're plugged into the mining scene probably more than most. You mentioned Kazakhstan. What are some of the other geographies that you see benefiting from that? I think there is obviously a push for North America to pick up some of the slack, but that may not be realistic. So I'm just curious about what this means for sort of the geographical distribution of Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, great question. So far what I've seen is that Kazakhstan, Quebec, Texas, and even Paraguay are kind of the areas that Bitcoin miners are looking at. So the biggest issue is transporting all these machines right now, which is really tough, especially given that the price of Bitcoin is actually pretty high for Bitcoin mining itself. Like, you're making a lot of money if you're plugged in right now. And these people are going to have to forego all those profits. They're going to have to ship these machines and set up new locations. North America right now, there's a lot of energy to be used, but there's not a lot of facilities built up all over the place. There's just like not that many facilities, and so people are scrambling to figure that out. Paraguay is an interesting location that I've heard of a lot recently. There's some new facilities being built out down there, and there's pretty cheap energy as well. So it just kind of depends also on like what the risk appetite for these Chinese capitalists are looking like. Do they want to move all their machines halfway across the world, or do they want to move it a little bit closer to home, like it's somewhere in Central Asia? But Central Asia brings up its own problems as well. There's less rule of law, and building the machine, like the hardware requirements for it, is not as great as North America. So there's that interesting development for sure. I think it's going to be a pretty seismic move for the Bitcoin mining industry and then Bitcoin itself over the next year.
Yeah, it should be noted that Bitcoin appears down on the news of that coming out this morning. We are going to stay in the realm of Bitcoin mining, and we are going to shift to the Bitcoin Mining Council, something spawned by Elon Musk and MicroStrategy CEO Michael Saylor. They had a meeting recently, and the message from that meeting was, we need to focus on the messaging. That feels a little flat to me, honestly. I would hope to see a little bit more substantive conversation around, again, how do we understand the footprint, the environmental footprint of the Bitcoin network? And if we were to believe reports out of this meeting, it's mainly a messaging issue at this point. I'm going to throw this to you, Ben. I mean, what's your immediate take on this? Are we going to see something more here, or is this kind of the scope of the information warfare battle? What do you think?
I think what we absolutely need in the world is another PR firm. That is really what is going to solve all of our issues around this. No, I think this is, yeah, it felt flat for me too. I was pretty disappointed when I saw the story come out yesterday. I was like, oh my God, they said something awesome, and then dived in and then was just kind of left with, okay, so we didn't really say anything though. I do think the messaging is an important aspect of this. Like we talk about this all the time too. Like, there's a variety of conversations that are happening out there, but they do seem to be really, I don't want to say disingenuously framed. I think they're self-interested framing, which is understandable. And so like the messaging is going to need to change. That being said, I think, maybe that is the, the role of journalists in reporting on these things. And like, we do that as well. And it's other entities that are going to be doing that too, that maybe the Bitcoin Mining Council is not as great as it's suited for. Like, I would really rather see like some actual concrete ideas coming out of this rather than just talking about it as an information warfare, because it's not going to change. Like, the electricity use by mining is like information warfare. That's not actually changing anything on the ground. You're trying to like change hearts and minds, and that's not going to do it, in my opinion. So fell flat for me too. But Jen, what are your thoughts?
Well, if the problem is the messaging, Elon Musk is kind of spewing a lot of messaging that is inconsistent, and he's at the head of this council. So that's kind of interesting to me. I mean, just connecting the two stories, maybe one of the issues that the council should be speaking about is all of these Chinese miners that may be coming to North America, and how do we support them? So I think maybe some more thoughtful conversation like that coming out of the council might help steer the mainstream media in the right way, because I think right now there's just nothing to report on except for, what some people are tweeting.
Elon is out of the council, by the way. He was he was an early participant, but he is no longer a part of the council. It's unclear if he was even ever a part of the council. Well, I mean, he was initially in the meetings with the Bitcoin Mining Council, and they kind of like brought all these heads of state, I guess, together to talk about Bitcoin mining and inform him on the current state of the Bitcoin mining network. But I don't think he was ever officially a part of it. It's definitely a Michael Saylor-driven phenomenon with a bunch of other public Bitcoin mining companies, which of course brings up its own considerations.
Yeah, you mentioned, Jen, that's a really interesting point about the environmental shift, because you are taking a bunch of people who are mining using hydropower, you're bringing them to America where 11% of power is sourced renewably. So it's just like, it seems to be making the situation worse, if we're looking at it in those terms. I sat in on this meeting for a little bit on, Twitter Spaces. It was interesting. I mean, I don't think that we've really encapsulated what the meeting was about by Michael Saylor's. Like, we're not trying to fix Bitcoin. Like, that was a large part of it. It's about the messaging. But we did hear from a lot of mining representatives who honestly did shed a lot of light on what's actually going on. And I do think it's necessary information to get out there. So hopefully this will be an effective vehicle for doing that. We tend to paraphrase things and just kind of, give superficial takes on all of this stuff. And so really getting people who are in the industry and diving deep and giving us that meaty data is very helpful in our messaging as well. So hopefully it will do something.
Naomi,
and not
can you
just
shed a little bit of light on? Can you shed a little bit of light on what was said from the mining reps? I am curious about that, because if there is substance, that's great. There's informational communication, and then there's also proposals for action, and those are two separate things in my mind. So what was your kind of large takeaways from what the mining reps were saying?
For sure. I mean, just to quickly summarize, because I know we have to move on, mining is super opaque. It's really difficult to get a gauge on what is electricity sources actually being used. And so they were actually just giving data points for that. So I think one of the main purposes of the council will be to kind of aggregate that data, make it more transparent, find ways to actually, package it together so people can understand it. Because right now, you have these studies, but they're kind of picking up things from the air and trying to put things together. But there's a lot of guesswork involved. So hopefully this will create a more substantive conversation. But Zach, what's coming up after the break?
We are staying in North America, and we are going to Chicago, my kind of town. Chicago is, and it may one day also be a North American crypto center, according to a new post in the Chicago Tribune. We're going to talk about that and some of the momentum that Illinois' leading city is capturing. Stick with us. It's The Hash. Talk to you soon.
CoinDesk Indexes, the market standard for crypto assets since 2014. Our trusted data powers billions in publicly traded funds. CoinDesk Indexes are the standard used by institutions, and they're the key for investors looking to understand and access crypto markets.
CoinDesk Bitcoin Price Index, XBX, has been instrumental to Grayscale, enabling investors around the world to access Bitcoin through a regulated, familiar product.
CoinDesk Indexes enabled the early adopters to build crypto investment vehicles, and they're already trusted by a new generation of global investors.
Welcome back to The Hash, everyone. We are going to Chicago and talking about what's happening there. So Chicago has been trying to position itself as a new crypto hub in the USA. There's a lot of stuff going on there. You've got, cryptocurrency mining facilities, one of the Midwest's largest cryptocurrency mining facilities, actually. You got this Chicago-based ATM operator. You've also got a bill that's in the House right now, and it's to try to create a special purpose depository institute, sort of something akin to what Wyoming has been a trailblazer for and has really worked for them. So Chicago wants to do something similar, just sitting there waiting to be voted on at the moment, which probably won't happen for a few more months. But just a lot of stuff going on there. And I know that there have been regulators and officials in Chicago who've talked about reclaiming this title and being this cryptocurrency financial center. Obviously, Chicago is a big financial hub that's always kind of, competing with New York on that. New York has kind of killed cryptocurrency. So I wonder whether Chicago can do something different and take that mantle. What are your thoughts, guys? Jen, what are your thoughts on all of this? What do you think of the prospects of Chicago are in this realm?
Well, when I think about a crypto center, I start thinking about what elements do we need for a city to be a crypto center. And I don't know what that is, but I know that most of us were just in Miami, and on one of our shows, I think 2 weeks ago, we said that, Zach, you would come back and you would tell us if you thought that Miami was the crypto center that they are portraying they are. So I'm going to kick this up to you. What are the elements that a city needs to be a real crypto hub?
Well, you need a mayor with laser eyes. So I don't know who the mayor. I think it's like Lori Lightfoot right now. I forget who the mayor of Chicago is right now, but she needs to get on that. But anyway, Miami that week, yeah, it was definitely a crypto center that week. Everybody was there, man. You had to be there. But
virus is
as far as what's up? Yeah. Oh, yes. The virus, the literal virus is spreading. All right. Anyway, we'll get away from Miami. We'll go back to, we'll go back to Chicago for a minute. Full disclosure, I went to college in Chicago, lived there for 5 years. Great place. Love the city. A lot of good stuff going on. I think the crypto activity in Chicago kind of has tracked to its history as a big commodities market. So a lot of the financial activity in Chicago is around like commodities trading, right? So historically, corn, grain, all those like boring old futures, right? Bitcoin and Ether are classified as commodities in the US. So some of that activity has sort of like naturally followed into Chicago. But there's also like more recent developments that I think are super interesting. FTX, FTX US, which is helmed by Sam Bankman-Fried, just recently opened a Chicago office. Coinbase had a Chicago office for a number of years. There was this really interesting effort called the Chicago DeFi Alliance, which is now rebranded as the DeFi Alliance, which sort of coalesces a lot of really interesting players in that space. So I think there is actually genuinely like some infrastructure for exciting crypto activity to take place in Chicago. And I think it would be cool if the second city ultimately outshined New York on the crypto front one day. It's all to be determined. I don't know if it's going to happen in terms of getting people excited and getting people to move there. It definitely doesn't have, the Miami sunshine, but, it has some pieces. It has some pieces and it could all click at one point.
Yeah,
just to jump in there.
Take it, Will.
You got it, Ben.
Okay.
Look, everyone's being so nice.
I just think what is interesting is seeing like the holistic treatment here in terms of looking at it. Like the Tribune article did a good job of putting all these kind of not disparate elements together, but you have like mining, you have like trading, you have like Bitcoin ATMs, you have like legislation that's being passed. And I think a lot of times we see sort of like one-off bills get put through or things like this. I'm thinking about, mining in Kentucky, for example. And so, building out that larger infrastructure around all these different activities is kind of what I think you need for like, a city to be a cryptocurrency hub in a lot of ways. It needs to be functional. You need to have optionality. You need to have, the mining and stuff like that. I'm curious about the ways that, as we see continued actions in China, like where these miners go and how like different municipalities might try to incentivize them to come there. I think that could be a really interesting next step. And we'll see if, maybe Chicago throws its hat in the ring.
Will, I know we're going to kick it to you, but I want your opinion on this. Where the miners move, is that going to determine where the next big crypto center is, do you think?
I don't think so too much. Mining itself, it just kind of moves where there's cheap energy. So I think like Zach's point about like there's a lot of commodities desks in Chicago, like it's a city known for that. And I think that you could see a lot of trading operations move into that area, which would just bring more jobs overall than just mining facilities. But there is like growth in mining in Illinois and throughout the Midwest.
Okay, well, I'm going to take us down a different track. We are not building out holistic things. We are going to the land of scams where I tend to live most of my days. So the hardware company Ledger was a victim of a data breach last year that exposed over 200,000 users, name, information, email, address, phone numbers, all these other details. And since then, we've sort of seen a steady drum of scams start to come out of that. It's extended in a wide variety of ways, not just from like phishing emails, but also to like, emails threatening home invasion, potential SIM swaps, like a whole variety of other things. But so scammers are taking this to the next level. So this first happened in May, but another iteration of it has popped up and was published in a blog post that they put up yesterday. But basically, scammers are building fake nano Ledger hardware wallets and inserting a malicious USB into them, and then putting them in Ledger boxes, shrink wrapping them, putting them in bags, and sending them to people along with a letter that basically says, hey, like, because of our security breach, like your funds are insecure, plug this in, run this software, and, input your seed phrase, and, you'll be secure again. Basically, we're giving you full hardware. So this was just really interesting to me because a lot of times when we think about scams, we think about what's the cheapest way to reach the most people and hope that somebody fucks up. Basically, that's the way it goes. Or you can go the alternative route and do like the $5 wrench attack, where you just buy a wrench for $5 and just like attack someone with it to get their keys. Now, this is just a weird balance of the two I've found, because, you know, not only do you have to like solder this USB in there, you have to like build out these boxes, you have to like create all these slick materials and then hope that somebody actually falls for it. So I just thought this was a really interesting escalation of the situation. Redditors did too. They were just kind of seeing this and they were saying, this is pretty impressive, actually. But yeah, Naomi, I want to toss this over to you to get your thoughts.
Well, for sure. I mean, one of the first rules that people will say if you're new to the space, you're getting into hardware wallets, buy directly from the retailer, right? You should never buy off Amazon or from eBay or any of these places that something that's refurbished. They may say that it's brand new. Just don't do it. It should never be from a third party, because this type of stuff does happen. You get devices that have been compromised and people will just insert something malicious in there. You plug it in and poof, all of your Bitcoin is gone. So it's interesting that now people are doing this without going through these third-party sellers. They're just going directly to the source, given that we had that big data breach. I want to go back to that data breach of Ledger, because there's no reason why they should have been keeping a record of everyone who's bought a Ledger. I think that's really irresponsible. And I like Ledger as a company and I like their product and I think it's really solid. But that's a really negligent practice of them to just be keeping this database and then not securing the information in it that has the home addresses of all of these people who are into crypto. I just thought that was a disaster. And now we're seeing the ramifications of that with people actually being targeted. I wonder if there have been reports of people who have actually used this and been like, oh, thank you, Ledger, for being on top of this and sending me this device so I can protect myself, and just plugging it in and then, being hurt from it. The more we can get the word out about this type of thing, the better, because it all comes down to educating people that these kind of attacks do happen. But Will, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, obviously the long tail here is probably the most concerning now. There's been a lot of instances over the history of crypto where founders have just been targeted by scammers, and people have even had their homes swatted, or even like worse things happen to them. Ledger unfortunately put a lot of people in physical danger, especially because they gave out addresses, like physical home addresses within the data breach. And so that's even more concerning than just you losing your funds. This story from Ben, really interesting that scammers are going all the way to do this, but at the same time, it's not necessarily surprising. People with crypto have a lot of money and they often make mistakes because they're human as well. So you might have the best OPSEC possible, but you might make one mistake and then these scammers get away with a ton of money. Just pretty unfortunate situation all around.
Yeah, and I was talking with our podcast editor, Adam Levine, who is also on the show from time to time, and he pointed out, and I think rightly, when I was like, this is really ambitious, it seems like it takes a lot of time and energy and money to put this scam forth. Is it really effective? And he pointed out that people that are using Ledger or using hardware wallets are pretty deep into crypto for the most part. And so even if you get 1 in 100 hit with this, it could really, really pay off. And that's kind of the point to you, Will, in talking about addresses and personal identifying information, right? I think that what I take away from this too is that there's all this information, and I believe part of this breach was because of a third-party breach. It was through Shopify, one of their e-commerce partners. And that shows that it's really unfortunate, right? Ledger has since updated all their policies. They're regularly deleting all the data they have. But I think this is a good instance of this isn't just a one-off thing. And once your information's out there, it can get used for a whole preponderance of different scams and stuff like that. And these things just keep happening and they keep evolving. And so it's not something that's one and done. Maybe you get a phishing email. There's a whole host of consequences that come from it. And is why we take privacy and security and all these things really seriously here in our reporting.
It's great that Ledger is now taking the initiative to do the right thing and what they should have done in the first place. It's also a lesson to consumers. You're putting your money out there and, you're putting your information out there, and you need to be careful with where you're putting it. So individuals, if you're out there, a tip to you, don't be using your home address when you get this stuff sent. Go to the post office, get a PO box. All of this stuff starts to become routine and necessary if you're going to be in this world, and putting your information out and giving it out to companies, because you can't always trust the companies. So it's just important to remember that. And it doesn't matter how many regulations are out there saying companies have to protect your data. Sometimes they just don't. So individuals really do need to take the initiative and take responsibility as well.
This is that I was just going to say, like, we talked about Mark Cuban yesterday and the cost of education and like to do your research and stuff like that. This is sort of like the cost of security education, unfortunately, and it causes us to have companies, change their policies. But Jen, take us to the world of CNN.
Just before I go there, it's just so unfortunate that it takes massive data breaches like this to have companies relook at their policies and what they're doing. So we'll see what happens. But okay, a happier story to end the show off with. CNN is getting into the NFT game. This month, the media organization is launching Vault by CNN. Story? So it's happy, okay? I like it.
Okay, I just like that. It's so happy. I don't know. Ever.
Of NFTs featuring newsworthy moments from the network's 41 history will be included. So I know I was laughing through that. Let me know if you have any questions about what's being launched.
Lots of questions.
I guess the first question that comes up for me in this story is we've talked about news items and tweets and social media being NFTs before. And the digital rights question always comes up. In this collection, you don't own the rights to any of the newsworthy moments that you are purchasing the NFT for. You just own it as a collectible. And so I'm really interested to see how this might evolve for news organizations, where we can now start licensing and swapping out rights for different moments that were captured in history. Will, I'm going to throw this to you first. Are you interested in owning the NFT for some amazing newsworthy moment?
This is just so odd to me all around. It's like trying to own a piece of history, which I just like. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I mean, that's why I went to college for was history, and it's like this goes against every single thread of being into that. Like, yeah, like a news company is trying to like put their print or image on like a historical event. Like, I get to a degree that's a cool thing about being like a reporter or a journalist is that you're like actively cataloging history, but you don't try to like sell it necessarily more than just like funding your ability to continue doing it. So this seems like kind of a money grab to a degree. Probably, I mean, all NFTs are sort of, so maybe, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Well, I mean, I'll push back a little bit. Like, for example, you have the first man on the moon and you have the newspaper article that shows it. A lot of people choose to keep that and say, like, this was a moment in history that I witnessed and it was really cool. So I can understand where they're coming from. They kind of see this desire of people to want to, keep the memories in a tangible form and be able to look back on it and point to it and say, I was there. And so now we're moving into the digital realm, and this is kind of the digital version of that. I mean, the difference is that in the newspaper situation, it's just an individual choosing to keep it something that they owned. And in this one, it's CNN selling a bunch of news bites. But I mean, that's what they do. That's their job description, to sell news bites. And now they're just doing it in short, pithy blockchain forms, which is, I'm not going to buy one. I could think of nothing worse. That would be like a shit coin, right there in my wallet. And I don't usually use that term. But I definitely don't want a token that's from CNN. But I can imagine that there might be other people who choose to get something like this. I don't know. Ben, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to put on my Zach hat because this is happening on the Flow blockchain, right? And I think that's the really interesting thing here in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think when looking at like, these kind of NFT chains that are being built out, I think this is a feather in Flow's cap in a lot of ways. Like we looked previously at smaller projects moving there, but if you're looking for a place where you can have like, Dapper Labs obviously has the mainstream cred because of NBA Top Shots. But like CNN's a huge media brand. That is a worldwide media brand. The fact that they are choosing to like put their projects on the Flow blockchain, I think is interesting. And, maybe they saw the success of Top Shots and like the NBA, and that's something that appeals to their audience too. But they're like, okay, we can do this on this one. So this feels like a really big project to be building out on there. And so I'm curious about what other sort of like mainstream icons might follow suit if they choose to get into the NFT game, because this seems to be, the first step, but certainly not the last.
It's on the environmentally conscious Flow blockchain, which I thought was really interesting highlight of the press release issued by CNN, that part of the narrative isn't going away. Everything that is touching blockchain now has to at least make a good faith effort to say, hey, no, we're not burning down the rainforest here. So I thought that was an interesting little footnote on that announcement. Jen, any last thoughts here on the CNN NFT?
Well, I guess my last thought is the user experience. So when you get this NFT, you display it in your like CNN Moments vault, and people can, I guess, you keep it there. And I don't know who wants to do that. I mean, I'm not going to be setting up an account and doing that, but we'll see. I'm sure there are some people who would like to own some moments in history, but take us home.
Yeah, I'll take you home. If you can sell it, the people will come. That is a crypto truth. Maybe we'll see. Anyway, I think that's it for the show. I think that's it for the show today. I think the hash is over for Friday, for this week even. Pretty good week. What'd you guys think? This week? Good week?
It was solid. It was a great week.
Yeah. Solid.
Solid
7.
So nice to see
8.
all of your faces.
We are all back. It's been a while. We just got a rotating chairs vibe, but this was nice. This is nice.
We did it.
This is good times. It's good times. We did it, gang. We'll be back again next week to go even harder, and it will be great. So stick with us. CoinDesk TV has All About Bitcoin at 3 p.m. Eastern today, and we'll be back next week with a full slate of programming. Tuesday, we are off. Monday, celebrating Juneteenth, which is important, and we will talk to you on Tuesday with the latest from crypto news from the hash. It's been a good week, and we will see you later. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, team.
Bye.
Bye.